get started. Should I just introduce myself, Leslie, or do you want to? Okay.
No, go for it.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Laura Quigg, and I am with the League of Women Voters of New York City. We've been using ranked choice voting. So I'm going to present on that, which is, I assume, why you're here. So I'll start by sharing my screen. I do have a presentation that I've been using for giving talks that I'll let me play from the beginning. Okay. So for anybody who came in late, you can enter your questions into the chat. We'll take them at the end. This presentation should take about 30 minutes, maybe 35. So hopefully it will answer your questions, and then we can talk. We do also have some discussion after the talk about Joe Maisel is here to talk about his league's involvement with ranked choice voting in the League of Women Voters of Manhasset and Port Washington. So we'll broaden it out a little bit after my presentation. You know this, so I will skip this page. So first off, ranked choice voting. So this is just the what. I do come back to this sort of thing. Just as a very basic thing to say, what is ranked choice voting? In most elections, you can only choose one candidate. So that's the kind of voting that we're generally used to doing. That's called single choice voting, where you would be voting for just one candidate, or say for judges, one block of candidates. With ranked choice voting, the way that we have passed it in New York City, you can rank up to 5 candidates in order of preference. So the 5 is not magical. It is just the way that the initiative was passed in New York City. And so this is just a simplified version of the ballot. And I'm going to come back to that again in a few slides. So we're doing a lot of educating, and one of the more illuminating statements that was made by one of our telephone callers was just, this is new to me, but it's really just another way of voting. So we've found that for voters, the concept of ranking is intuitive. So you think of, what cereal do I want at the store? What if my first choice is not available? What might be my second choice, third choice, fourth choice? Like I'm a Wheaties person, but they often didn't have Wheaties. And of course, Grape Nuts had a great crisis with just-in-time inventories where the people stores ran out of Grape Nuts. So I had to go to my third choice. Also, another way we've described it is about like pizza. If you're going to share pizza with your friends, you would have your first choice pizza, but what if no one wants that one? And then you think about, on the other side, what kinds can I absolutely not tolerate? So, maybe I really want a veggie, but other people won't want that. And I really can't handle anchovies. And so we'd end up most likely with cheese, because that's where that usually ends up converging. I just added a slide here on the kind of education that we've been doing so that you can get a sense for our process. And if you end up getting involved with ranked choice voting in your locale, you could think of it for yourselves. So we started off in 2019 because ranked choice voting for New York City did pass as a ballot initiative at that stage. So we started off by educating voters about the ballot initiatives and also encouraging them to go to the polls because it was an off-year election. And then for this year, we first wanted to educate ourselves. We have a great resource with the New York City Campaign Finance Board, and they had a train the trainer session. We also had phone calls with the League of Women Voters of Maine. Maine has been using ranked choice voting for several years now. So we did a postcard campaign with the Campaign Finance Board in advance of the special elections. And then we developed this presentation. And first we delivered it internally to vet questions and formulate answers. We've given this talk, not me, just personally, but I've probably given it maybe 15, 20 times, but over several of our various experts at our league, we've given over 50 talks to 2,000 people. We have social media, website, palm cards that we hand out at the voter registration and get out the vote events. We also have telephone service where people take calls. That's particularly challenging because it's really nice to have the visuals. And so to be able to talk about ranked choice voting without having something physically in front of people has been a little challenging. We also have some PSAs coming out now to try and encourage voters to rank more than one. So the benefits of the ranked choice voting, and this is something that we dealt with as we were talking to voters now, but also in our advocacy for the ballot initiatives back in 2019. Mostly it eliminates the need for runoff elections. That's a big one because it saves money and it saves having voters to go back to the polls. So I'll touch more about that in a minute. It also gives you more of a say in who gets elected. So even if your top choice candidate doesn't win, you can still help choose who does. Your preferences are reflected in the outcome. So the voters don't need to rank all 5 candidates, but we've been encouraging them to express the preferences and use the votes as fully as possible. I talk about, like, you have the candidates that you have on the island. So who do I have on the island and who do I have off the island? And so, the people you want off the island, those will not be ranked at all. And then you think about those who are on the island and try and rank those people for the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as much as possible. So you think of who you'll do a great job and support what you care about, and who will do a good enough job, and who can you absolutely not support. And we've been pedal to the metal now. This is a really important election for New York City. More benefits of ranked choice voting. It arguably promotes more civility and less negative campaigning. We don't have this totally in a vacuum. Certainly there's been a little bit of negative campaigning in New York City, but it's a very contested election, so we don't have a control sample on this one. That's because candidates who are not their top choice, they still need your support to be ranked as high up on the ballot as you can get. And so one way to think of this as the candidates who are running need to build coalitions of voters from the beginning. So they can't just appeal to their base and then try and build a coalition in the runoff in the second round. They have to do that all from the beginning. There's also a lot of studies that have shown that ranked choice voting leads to a more diverse and representative elected officials. So a lot of this was studied as part of the Charter Commission revision that was part of putting these ballot initiatives in place for the city, for New York City. So who uses ranked choice voting? It's used in over 20 cities, including Berkeley and Oakland, California, Cambridge, Massachusetts, St. Paul, and now New York City and Boulder, Colorado. The states, as I mentioned, Maine has used it for a few years now, so they gave us good information. They're a lot smaller. Alaska's just now using it. And so you note here that New York City is the largest population of any locale that's using ranked choice voting in the country. So it's bigger than Maine. It's bigger, of course, than any of these other cities. So there are a lot of eyes on us, and we're doing, we and many other good government groups and other participants have been doing everything we can to try and educate people, get them comfortable, and hopefully the turnout will reflect that level of comfort. It's also used in countries including Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Malta, and Scotland. Apparently it was developed in 1850 by an MIT scholar. So it's not new, but it's come and gone. This, of course, you can't see. This is all the places that have used ranked choice, are using ranked choice voting. And if you want me to share the slides with anybody, I'm more than happy to do that. Okay, as mentioned, ranked choice voting was approved by the people of New York City in the ballot initiative 1 of 5 in 2019. It did pass overwhelmingly with 73.5% of the New Yorkers. And we emphasize to our voters in the city that the people voted for it. It's not the legislators. If anything, some of the legislators are, they've got the way that they have to campaign a little bit shaken up. So it does throw things a little bit up in the air a little bit more for them. And it's effective this year, just January 1st, 2021. Let's see. So for New York City, the elections that will be ranked choice are just the New York City elections. So it's for the primary and the special local elections for city offices only. It's the 5 city offices of mayor, public advocate, and comptroller, which are citywide, and then the borough presidents and city council members. It will not be used in the general elections and in November, and it is not used in federal or state races. So it was a purely city charter ballot initiative. It's also not used in the judicial races. For example, I live in Manhattan. There's a Manhattan DA race, which you might have heard about. And there, that is not using ranked choice voting. I thought it was going to be difficult on the ballot, but I'll show you what it looks like. It's not as confusing as I thought it might be. Also not for judgeships, so it's just for city offices. So how did we vote for these offices before? With single choice, so just one candidate or one block of candidates, and plurality voting. So plurality means that you don't need to have a majority to win, with runoffs for citywide office. So there'd be runoffs for the citywide offices of mayor, public advocate, and comptroller. There'd be runoffs if no candidate got more than 40% of the total primary election vote. So that means that, first of all, a candidate can win with just over 40%. And so that's not a majority win. And if they get less, if no candidate gets more than 40%, then there'd be this runoff. And so, as I mentioned earlier, that's expensive. And many millions of dollars are spent on these runoffs. Also really low turnout because people, once they've gone to the polls, will be asked to return to the polls, and that adds to the expense. But also, it disenfranchises a lot of military and overseas ballots, I'm told, because the new ballots wouldn't often get to them in time. So ranked choice voting eliminates all runoff elections. So that for that reason, it's known as instant runoff. It might not be like precisely instant, but it is at once, like based on just that one ballot, the runoff is included in the ballot. So there's no separate going to the polls for a runoff election. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how you vote for the candidates, and then I'll talk about how the votes are tabulated. So this is the same picture that I had back on that front screen. So this is just a very simplified version of a ballot. And so New York City, the way that we passed a ballot initiative is that we can rank up to 5 candidates in order of preference. There's nothing magical about the 5 candidates. It is what the Charter Commission determined was a sort of a happy medium. There are some places that use ranked choice voting that have so that you can only rank up to 3. And then there are some places where you can have unlimited ranking, so you can rank as many candidates as there are. So this was the solution that they determined was a happy medium of sorts. So this is a simplified ballot where there are 5 candidates, A, B, C, D, E, and those are in the rows, and this will look like the ballot, as I'll show you in a minute. And the columns, so this person ranks their candidate B first choice, C second choice, A third choice, then E fourth, D fifth. This is actually what the sample ballot looks like for the New York City elections. This first page here are the citywide elections. So on the left is the mayor. The languages that it's translated in depends on the election district. This particular ballot was translated into Spanish. And so there are a lot of candidates for mayor. I've actually lost track. And you can also have a write-in at the bottom. And so those are in the rows, and the columns are choosing options, your choice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's where you rank it, is in the columns. We also have a public advocate race where there are only 3 candidates and doing write-ins. So there's only, you'd only rank up to 4. And we also have comptroller. So those are the citywide offices. We also, this is what this comes from Brooklyn. And so there's the Brooklyn Borough President, council member, and then over on the right here, you could see that Brooklyn has a judge of the civil court. So this is not ranked choice. So here it's vote for any 2. So they also allow the possibility of 2 write-ins. So there's no extra columns. This just looks like the kind of ballot that you're used to seeing. And so, as I said earlier, it's, when I'd heard of, the situation of having some of the races be like the citywide races be ranked choice and other races be not ranked choice, I was afraid it might be confusing, but I don't really think it is. Of course, people can always get confused, but I don't think I think they did a reasonable job here. As I said, the ranked choice voting in New York City is being used for special elections and the primary. There have been 4 special elections that have been held that use ranked choice voting. So we've got some good information on how things play out in the 4 special elections. So this is the sample ballot that's in the first one. It's a city council district 24, which is in Queens. And this was translated into English, Spanish, and Bengali. And it's not a primary, they get to choose what their party is. So this is what happened with this race. So now I'll talk about just 2 ways not to vote. Not to cast a ballot. And so these are things that should permeate any discussion of ranked choice voting, I would think. So here is the way that's the most egregious. This is called overvoting, where the voter is giving multiple candidates the same ranking. And this ballot has a person casting their ballot for both candidate B and C as their first choice. This is like voting for Biden and Trump in the same election for the same office. It just doesn't make sense. And so if this were to happen, it's not a valid ballot. It does, the scanner would kick it back. And so we have the option then of curing the ballot, and I'm told up to 3 times to be able to cure the ballot. That's if it's voting in person. If a person is voting this way on an absentee ballot, thanks to wonderful advocacy on the part of the League of Women Voters, they have the option to cure. They will be contacted, they will be given the opportunity to cure the ballot. But of course, it does introduce more uncertainty and more potential for things to go wrong. So this is the main way that we talk to people about how not to cast their ballot. So, because it is essentially a deal killer. The other way is much less problematic, and this is if a person casts a ballot for one candidate using more than one ranking. In this case, the candidate can only receive 1 vote. So this person voted for candidate B and really, really liked candidate B. So they gave candidate B their first, second, third, fourth, fifth choice. It does not invalidate the ballot. It just means it's the same as if they'd voted for candidate B as their first choice. So it's just leaving some cards on the table. It's meaning that they're not expressing any more of their preferences if they have any. But as I said, it's not the most egregious thing. It's just an issue to avoid, and we do try to get people to think about who they would want to vote for beyond just the top candidate. Okay, so next up, this is the next part of the talk, and this is we do go through how your vote is counted for people, because I find that it means that they don't. It helps them not have their votes determined, like go down a rabbit hole, that they know what's happening with their ballot. So there's two things that can happen for when the vote is counted. The first is if the candidate receives more than 50% of the first choice votes. If this happens, they win the election. And so this is fairly universal. So in this simplified version, there are 4 candidates, A, B, C, D, and B got 54% of the votes, so B has won. And this is what happened with that first city council race that I showed you the ballot of earlier. So in this case, James Gennaro got more than 50%. He actually got more than 60%, but he only needed more than 50% to be declared the winner. So this was our first experience in the city with ranked choice voting, and we were all excited, and we didn't even have a runoff. So we had to wait for the next one. So James Gennaro was declared the winner based on those first choice votes because he got more than 50%. But we didn't have to wait long because in the second special election, and as I said, there were 4. There were 2 in Queens in February. There were 2 in the Bronx in March. So in this race, the 2 top candidates were Selvina Brooks Powers, who got 38%, and Pistacho Sina, who got 35%. So those are the unofficial results from round 1. So you can see how the results were reported like just on that first day. So in this case, I'm sure you can't see this, but this goes through, it went through all the rounds of going until, they actually go until there's only 2 candidates left. So because there were 9 candidates, and the opportunity for runoffs, it went all the way to round 9. And ultimately, Sylvania Brooks Powers did win with 59% of the vote. So the way that we have it in New York City is that we do actually go all the way until there are just 2 candidates left. I believe that there's other ways to do it. You could have it end right after there are 50%, but that's the Charter Commission wanted to have all of the votes be expressed. So now you can see that Sylvania Brooks Powers has that semi type of a mandate at almost 59%. So I'm going to walk through, I'm just showing you what the results look like, and then I'm just going to show you a simplified version for how the votes are counted. The other 2 races, the 2 in the Bronx, also went to the instant runoff. So this one is was on March 23rd in the Bronx, and so there again it did go up to all the rounds. And this is the one in the last one. Both of these are on March 23rd. So now I'm going to do like the more simplified version for how this works. So if no candidate gets more than 50% at first, all of the first choice votes are counted. So in this example, we've got 4 candidates, same as before. On the left is an example ballot. So this is 1 voter. So we're going to see what happens with that 1 voter's choices as we go through the rounds. On the right are all the ballots. So in this election, B got the most votes with 39%. You can see on the right. And D got the fewest number of votes with 12%. So no candidate in this case got more than 50% of the first choice votes. So the counting continues in rounds. And each round, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. So now we're going to go to the runoff part using the rankings. If your top choice candidate's eliminated, your vote goes to the next highest ranked candidate on your ballot. So that's what's going on with our person over on the left. This person really, really liked D and chose D as their top choice. But D got the fewest number of votes with 12%. So D is going to get eliminated, and the votes that people who ranked D as their first choice will have their votes reallocated to their second choice. So for individual on the left, they like D the best. D's gone. So we go to their second choice, which is C. So for that individual, his or her votes, new vote goes to their next ranked choice, which is C. And across all the ballots, it gets reallocated. So the votes cast for D get reallocated. So the vote for example voter goes to C, but for all the voters, they get distributed to their second choice candidates. So there are 12% of the candidates of the people who like D. Of the 12%, 2 like C best, second best. So that goes from 22% to 24. 6 like B next. So that goes from 39 to 45. And 4 liked A best. So that goes from 27 to 31. I find we get questions if I don't just walk through like that specific part there. So no candidate still has more than 50%, but as I said, for New York City, we all go to when there's only 2 candidates left anyway. So here we are, snapshot. We've got our example ballot, the 1 voter on the left, all the ballots on the right, D's out. So the process continues until there are only two candidates left. So if your top choice candidate's eliminated, your vote goes to the next highest ranked candidate on your ballot. So for our example ballot, the one person here on the left, they like C next. But C's now getting eliminated because C got the fewest number of votes with 24%. So C's getting eliminated. Those votes get reallocated. Our one voter on the left liked B as their number third choice. That their votes goes to their third ranked candidate. So now this is the final slide. So the votes cast for C get reallocated. And so finally, the 24% that had ranked C next get reallocated to A and B. So that 24% of those people who liked C next, 13% liked B next, and 11% liked A next. So B is the winner finally with the 58%. So by this round, B has 58% of the votes, and so candidate B wins. So the process continued until there were 2 candidates left. As I said, that's the way that we've got it set up in New York City. So those are my dates. With that, I'm going to stop sharing and I can take questions. Let's see. Did anybody enter questions into the chat? Let's see.
Yes, there were a few questions.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, I'm going to probably go backwards. If somebody gets 50% before it gets down to 2 candidates, does that person win? The answer to that is no. This is actually a source of confusion for us. I had that wrong for a little while, but the way that we have it in New York City, and this is not necessarily set in stone for all ranked choice voting everywhere, it does continue until there are only 2 candidates left. And the way that it was expressed to me is that way the votes can be fully expressed. So that is showing people's preferences all the way. Let's see. I think some questions are getting answered here. You know what? I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to manage this chat. Can I just ask people to raise their hand and ask the questions up?
Do you want me to go back though and give you the questions, Laura, for the ones that are still in the chat?
It just looked like some of them got answered, so that was what was confusing to me.
Oh, okay, sure.
So let's see. I can do this.
Okay.
Why is ranked choice voting not used for general city elections and judicial races? Okay, so the judicial, it was a ballot initiative, which is New York City. The judicial races are not city-based. So that's why it's not judicial races. For the general election, they did go back and forth on this. So one of the reasons that I heard was about the difficulty of dealing with fusion voting. But that's not to say that that's the only reason. Kate, do you know any more on that?
I think the belief was that because candidates can be endorsed by more than one party, their names would appear they could appear in 3 or 4 columns. And to try to educate voters at this point in the process about how to rank them if they're running, for example, on the Democratic Party and the Green Party, or if they're running both on the Republican and the Conservative Party, just too much to handle. So this was the way to start it off. And the truth is that in the special elections and the primaries, those are the contests, those are the elections where you're going to have the greatest number of candidates. And the idea is to get a consensus winner. So, and when you've got 12 candidates, you really do want to believe that when all the votes are counted, the person who wins has achieved 50% plus one of the votes. So perhaps someday there will be ranked choice voting in the general election, but right now this is where we're at. And I think this is a really good start, and we can evolve forward perhaps.
Can you explain what you're saying about voters cannot cure an absentee ballot?
The ballot is a secret document. It's inside of an envelope. If the Board of Elections were to open an absentee ballot, they would know whose ballot it was. You can't do that. So you can't cure that's one of the downsides of voting absentee. You don't get the three chances for your ballot.
Okay.
The cure process applies to the envelope, the oath envelope that the voter signs. And in the past, it was thrown away for the most simple and unfortunate reasons. I mean, if there was a stray mark on it, for example, or if the voter sealed it with tape rather than just licked it closed. So those things that's what's gone away. If the voter, the easiest example to understand is if the voter signs the oath envelope into which they have put their absentee ballot, that's going to be fine. That's going to be put in the valid pile. But if the Board of Elections receives an oath envelope that's unsigned, they have the name of the voter on that envelope. So they can contact that voter, and they will do it all the ways they can, by phone, by mail, by email. And they will say, you failed to sign your envelope. We want to count your vote, but you've got to sign it. And they will offer them the opportunity to sign that ballot. Sign the envelope.
All right, thank you, Kate.
You're welcome.
So Peter Kahn, can you explain what your question is? What if B receives 2, 3, 4?
Yeah, you indicated what happens if some individual selects all 4 or 5 choices, and then curing would mean that they would only get their first choice. But suppose they pick the last 3, or, in other words,
If they didn't choose one, they just ranked 2, 3, 4, but not 1?
Yes.
Oh, then it would, yeah, we actually had this question that we that we sorted out the answer to. So now we know the answer. It's 2, 3, 4 would just go to be 1, 2, 3. So.
And then that person would get 1 because 1.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So it would shift if they didn't fill out a first choice at all. The person if I understand your question correctly,
well, they didn't do that, but they also just gave the same candidate, position 2, 3, and 4.
Oh, I see. So
1, 2, 3, 4, 4.
Then it's just that one candidate as their first choice.
Second choice.
It would be the same as if they had just voted for one candidate. That's the way the scanner will read that.
Okay, good.
So it's not a fatal error, but the voter's ballot loses its power.
Right.
So I think I answered about 50. When do you expect the data back from the June primary on the ranked choice ballots and ballot and exhaustion, et cetera? It's going to take a while. It's, we, of course, in New York State have them waiting for absentee ballots, military overseas ballots. So that's already a fair amount of time. We have signed on to machines to count the ballots, and do the rounds of rankings. And I'm told it's the same machine that's used in places elsewhere that use ranked choice voting. So it's going to be as fast as it can be, but it's going to take likely several weeks, if not more. So we're trying to tell people to be patient. Yeah, and the statistical analysis is done by computer. Hazel Dukes, right? Okay, so if people can, the chat, Hazel Dukes, the NAACP New York State Conference president, published an op-ed opposing the way that ranked choice voting was implemented in New York City. Here is a quote a recent poll by Pix 11 News and Emerson College found that 40%, I'm not going to read everything here, but it's just saying that it's in the chat if anybody wants to read it. A disproportionate number of Black Democrats, particularly older voters. And so the point is that the concern is about having some segments of the population use the rankings in a disproportionate way compared to other portions of the population. So Black and Latino, which I think she's stating, Black and Latino voters might rank one versus other candidates might, and this is just might rank more. So if some segments are using all of their rankings and others are not, then it's effectively disenfranchising the ones who use fewer of their rankings. I've read the article, so I know what this is talking about. It is a concern. It is absolutely a concern. That is why outreach has been a lot. In fact, I reached out to Hazel Dukes and asked if we could do anything to help. And she said that the NAACP has its own educational effort. So she's good. Thank you very much. And so, we're all doing education, to try and get people to understand that they should, try and use their rankings. It is a part of their vote. And also, Joe, you can chime in here because this is do you want to talk about this? So Joe Mazel's going to talk in a minute about more on what his league is doing, but do you want to just address this particular topic right now?
Sure, just briefly. And there was exit poll data from actually the initial elections in New York City that used ranked choice voting. There were some a few months earlier in February, March. Laura, I don't know if I remember we talked about that.
No, I have it in front of me, so I can.
If you want, I don't know if you can post the URL, but there's that data. And then of course, FairVote's been collecting data on this for a long time. And so at the end of the day, different groups, dividing people in terms of different ethnicities, et cetera, don't seem to have any meaningful difference in terms of their understanding on ranking ballots. And so we can share that information as well.
Yeah, no, I'm going to get it right now.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could just add to that, I think the other thing is runoff voting. If you have to have a runoff election, that in and of itself can become disenfranchising because you're asking voters to go to the polls twice. And the reality is this year with 13 people running for, Democratic candidate for mayor, the chances that any one person is going to get even 40% of the vote on the first round is practically non-existent. So there would almost certainly be a runoff election for the mayor, and that would require people to then take more time and go out and vote again, in addition to costing a lot of money that, quite frankly, given the recovery from the pandemic, we could definitely use for other things.
Okay.
And Leslie, I'm sorry, Laura.
Yeah, no, sorry. I'm having trouble getting it. So I'll have to.
If I may, I'll pile on to that point, Leslie,
Okay.
Which is that first of all, it's very important to remember that if somebody just puts their first choice candidate, their vote counts. They are not disenfranchised. It's the equivalent of not showing up for the runoff. So if you vote your first choice and then you don't rank, again, it's as if you didn't show up for the runoff. Now, if let's say 75% of ballots are filled out and 25% are not, that's effectively a 75% turnout for the runoff election. By New York City standards, that would be fantastic turnout. So it's important to keep that in mind. And as communities that use ranked choice voting over time, the ballot exhaustion becomes less and less of an issue, meaning more and more people fully rank their ballots.
Oops, sorry. I'm sharing it now. I sent it. Okay. All right. Did you want to say something, Kate?
Yes, please, if you don't mind. There are probably many, many of you on this call who remember the transition from the lever machines to the paper ballots and the scanners. And that really did take a little while for voters to become accustomed to. And I believe that similarly, this will take a little while for voters and candidates to become accustomed to, so that they will understand that this is a better way. We will get a candidate who becomes our elected official, who is more widely supported than somebody who just is elected in a special election with 12% of the vote, perhaps. So I think it will take some time, and it's disturbing to hear Hazel Dukes' comments, but I think that given time, there will be much more acceptance and happiness, if you can say, with this system.
Right. Yeah, the reason I know the Hazel Dukes comments is because I was actually interviewed for CNN, and it is an article that has a quote from her that refers to the article that's here, and then a quote from me where, you know, essentially I say that we are hoping that people will find this to be a positive experience, you know, that you know, like, it's work, you know, but you know, that's the main crankiness that people have. But they say, you know, it's been worth it to me to spend that time evaluating the candidates, because even though my first choice candidate didn't win, maybe my second or third choice candidates will do, and I'll be like, hey, I made that happen, and that my vote helped. So you know, we're trying to get people to appreciate that they don't have to game it, that they can actually express their pure preferences and say, like, I'm never the conventional voter. I'm always thinking that the candidate that I want is not going to be the one that wins. So I'm always trying to game around, like, well, how do I vote? Should I vote for the person that I'm not really that fond of, but I like a lot more than the other person? So that's the kind of, I have the appreciation from that point of view.
Yeah, and I would actually say a lot of activist groups are looking at this as a great way for them to strategize around pushing their agendas. We actually did an event with the New York League of Conservation Voters, and We Act for Environmental Justice. I think it was just last week. And this was a big topic for them, was how they can use ranked choice voting to push forward an agenda that more aggressively addresses the risks of climate change. So that was cool.
Yeah, I was really impressed by that. I mean, they were talking about how the climate or the environment doesn't necessarily get front and center as a ballot issue for, you know, just one choice candidates, but you've got a few of them who are like trying to build coalitions across you know, common ground, and climate and environment might rise to the surface a little bit better. Are there any other questions on this, or otherwise, if anything occurs to people, let me know. But I'd asked, Joe had asked if he could talk about what his league is doing. So do you want to take the floor there, Joe?
Yeah, if we're good for now on questions, because I'll leave time to discuss after what I have to present as well. So Laura, thank you very, very much for you know, inviting me here and to partner. And I also, Leslie, thank you. And I'd also spoken to Bella Wang earlier from League New York City. So thank you to all of you. And also let me also thank you know, my own league, Port Washington Manhasset, and the great support that I've received from our board, from our leadership, and in particular, since this is being recorded, she's actually in the healthcare right now. Judy Esterquest has been tremendously supportive and helpful in introducing me to League New York City. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, because what I want to talk about are some possible actions. Oh, and by the way, I put this virtual background in so that everyone would know I'm in the right place. Peter, thank you for representing as well. I appreciate that. All right, let me know if I'm sharing. Are we good?
Yep.
Working, thank you. And pardon my voice, I'm a little bit under the weather. So as I said, I'm Joe Maisel, and I put my email up there, so you should feel free to contact me. I want to talk about some actions that your local league can take to move the ball forward on this issue. We and League Port Washington Manhasset, we formed an electoral systems committee, of which I currently am the chair. Now, let's talk about some activities and actions. One thing that we did was to concur with the national position. League of Women Voters US has a position on electoral systems reforms in Impact on Issues 2020, page 4748, which I highly recommend that you read. This is a really exciting development in the history of the league. We'll talk about that. But this national position that just about a year old has ample room for ranked choice voting. And I also want to urge you, what we did was we concurred in League Port Washington Manhasset, we concurred with this national position. And I have our pro-con study guide, and I'd be happy to share that with you. I'll put it into the chat even, you can grab it and you can use it. And then I would recommend also form a committee on this to move it forward. So what does moving it forward mean? Well, it means that we can partner with each other, local leagues can partner with each other to try to drive potentially state level concurrence on the national position. That's the great gift of having this national position. And we could do things like then work together to see bills like, this is a little wonky, but A4495, that's New York State Assembly 4495, which would permit ranked choice voting across New York State, take it beyond New York City. So wonderful that it's gotten started in New York City, and that League New York City has done amazing work to make it successful, but then we can try to drive it successfully throughout New York State. So just a little bit of interesting history here. This I think is relevant and something that you may or may not know, and something worth discussing even. The league over its 100-year history has taken positions on countless issues, but historically the league has never taken a position on how we elect our officials, the mechanism. Now, state level leagues doing this is nothing new. For the last 30 years at least, probably longer actually, 14 different state level leagues have taken positions on alternatives to plurality voting, usually almost always ranked choice voting. It's important to note that the national position doesn't support any particular election method. This is important because your community might be interested in some of the other alternatives to plurality, like approval voting or star voting. There are passionate advocates of these other systems, but they're all an improvement over plurality. So it allows, to concur doesn't mean you're committing to ranked choice voting, but you certainly can become an advocate for it. The National League, of course, has done this, has taken this position. Because they've done that, you could use this position to support or oppose federal legislation. A great example of that, and I'm not sure how many of you are following the FRA, the Fair Representation Act, well worth looking into. It's currently, looks like it's going to be introduced in the House of Representatives. Now, again, state level, if we were to concur at the state level, a state league could then use it to support or oppose state legislation. I think that's us, because in New York, we're not going to get ranked choice voting at the state level through ballot referendum. Not happening. Ballot referendums like they did in Maine and Alaska don't happen in New York, because in New York, to get a ballot referendum, you have to go through the assembly. So if it's going to happen in New York, it's going to come through legislation. And the same thing now, again, if you concur, you could potentially support using alternative voting methods like ranked choice voting in local elections. So for example, I'm hoping maybe we can advocate for using it for our school board elections, and maybe we'd get a more representative proportional result. We'll talk about that. We'll touch on that a little bit. I think it's interesting, the opening. I can't recommend, it's a short position, easy to read. I just think it's incredibly well written. I think that the opening statement is wonderful, promoting an open governmental system that is representative, accountable, and responsive. And ranked choice voting certainly fits with that the electoral methods that provide broadest voter support. I think Laura did a wonderful job of explaining how, the mechanism that you get the broadest voter representation. And again, fully compatible with RCV. Most states have focused on it, but again, the league at the national level doesn't, pigeonhole you to there. I'm repeating this because I want it to be clear that if your community is interested in other alternatives to plurality, concurring with the national position doesn't preclude them. Now, I think it's just worth looking at the sort of high level principles, right, that the national position takes. Verifiable and audible, ranked choice voting certainly is that. Promoting access to voting, certainly compatible with that. Encourages voter participation and engagement. There's actually some interesting studies out of the Bay Area showing increased voter participation because people feel that their votes aren't wasted. And that's, again, because it maximizes effective votes and minimizes wasted votes. Compatible with acceptable ballot casting methods, including vote by mail, 100%. And again, underrepresented groups. This is a key issue. And I think hopefully we could saw from Laura's presentation as to how it would allow those minority opinions to participate, to vote sincerely, and still know that their vote is going to be counted. Again, that is the same thing as, I love this term, sincere voting over strategic voting, right? And implement alternatives to plurality, because plurality voting is a big part of our problem. Now, just so you know, ranked choice voting is the mechanism to proportional representation, to allow us to move towards proportional representation. That's a little bit out of scope for this conversation, but I wanted to mention that there's an important tie to that. In fact, our electoral systems committee, we are actually working on understanding the depth of that, because I love the redistricting work. It was the work on redistricting is fabulous. There's an important tie-in here, but again, probably something that we can have a follow-up conversation on, because with half an hour left after a long day, almost 9 o'clock, we're not gonna wade into this. But I'm just gonna go over the actions again and talk about what we can do to move the ball forward on this. So again, consider local concurrence with the US position. And again, happy to provide a pros cons for that. Steal it, form a committee like we have if you'd like, and then work to partner with other leagues like ours. We would love to partner with you. Let's work to change the law of New York State. These 4495 is stuck in committee. And we have to work, we're gonna have to work to get it out of committee. We're gonna want to do the type of work that Laura and New York City have been doing, which is to drive successful adoption of ranked choice voting. One of the things I love seeing in the redistricting talk was all of the partnerships with other organizations. There are other organizations, lots of them, working on ranked choice voting. We could, again, especially once you've concurred, no problem, because in the position, education is one of the things that the league is behind. So I think, I actually put 2 different email addresses. I apologize for that. Both will work, but I would like to encourage you, please email me, text me. That's my phone number, by the way, my cell phone. I would really like to partner with you to try to move the ball on, move the needle on this. And thanks to the national organization, we have a very concrete and kind of league way to do this. So, Laura, that's what I had, and open to if anybody isn't too exhausted and wants to keep talking.
Are there any other, Lori?
I just wanted to clarify, with this position, we don't have to concur. It's already our position. That's an unnecessary step. That's the reason why we wrote the position so broadly. I was involved with the group of people across the state that wrote this position, and I actually brought it to New York State, to our state convention in 2019 as a non-recommended item, but it was not voted by New York State into a position at that time. And then instead, we brought it to the national convention last year and got it passed at the national level. It had already been passed at several states across the country. So with a national position, we can always act on it. It's our position. So you can educate, people, members, about certain things, but the boards would then use the criteria in the position to determine whether legislation, adheres to the criteria and act on it. We don't have to concur. It's already our position. I just wanted to clarify that.
Lori, help me understand that. There's been a lot of confusion around that. So that's really, really, I'm so pleased that you're here and we can talk about this. I really am. Because we were told that we would need to concur with the national position to act locally. Second, we were told that, for example, I'm here on Long Island, Port Washington, Manhasset. Gina Salitti, our assembly member, is on the elections committee in the assembly. We would love to meet with assembly member.
Who told you, Joe? Who told you that you had to concur? Who said that?
Without naming names, I'll just say our leadership said but I believe that they checked with a number of places. But again, my understanding was that, excuse me, concurrence at the state level was necessary for us to talk to our representatives, our state representatives.
So it seems to me that at the state level, our state board would take the lead and would determine whether or not, we can act on it. So we would just have to ask them, and then they would look at it and determine that. And certainly we could, try to influence that, present information to the state board as to why we think that this is something we should get behind.
Right. But yeah, at the local level, I completely agree with Lori, Joe, that as long as there's a state or national position that you can act under the rubric of, you don't need to concur with it. And that's certainly when I've spoken to state leadership, exactly what I've been told.
I could probably fill in because Joe had to go through me. So we spoke to Laura. And so Laura said that we had to concur with the national position at the local level. And then the issue for us is if we want to take up ranked choice voting, then our league would actually consider, because we concurred with the national position, and then we would have to consider if we want to take a position on ranked choice, then we as a local league can consider it. But if we opted to do it, any action we took would be limited to our catchment area, which would be limited in our case to our town. Now, if we worked in coalition with our other partners in Nassau County, we could try to advocate on behalf of Nassau, but that was kind of the process when we looked into it that they had suggested we take with respect to looking at this issue.
Okay, that's really interesting. So first of all, in terms of having to act locally, that's absolutely true, right? Yeah. In other words, we can't advocate at the state level for ranked choice voting if state doesn't have a position or tells us that we can. So that's absolutely right. We were only able to advocate for in New York City, nowhere else.
Right, but at the local level, I think I want to talk to Laura about that because I think there's some confusion about that because at the local level, your local board can make that determination. You don't have to have a study and concur. I mean, the local board may want to do that just to get more membership involved and understanding and make sure that there's member agreement on it. If they don't want to take that full responsibility themselves, I could understand, that they might want to do that if there isn't really a clear sense of, everyone being on the same page with it, then it's not going to do any harm. But it certainly isn't required to concur because it's already the position.
Kate?
I think the simplest way to think about this is that we in New York City were able to lobby our very local council folks and mayor and voters because it was a city issue. But if we wanted to go as a New York City League to the state Senate and the state assembly and say, hey, we love ranked choice voting. We would love to have a law passed that would apply to the entire state. We couldn't do that if the state league didn't have a position on that.
And what we were doing was in 2019, which was before there was a national position.
Right.
It's also true.
Right, so now, yeah, so
If you have a county, if you have county elections, perhaps there's a way to introduce it in those areas.
Yeah, we have 5 local leagues, so then each of them would, within our county, so then each of them would have to agree before we could take action on a county level.
Well, that'll
that
be
makes sense.
interesting.
See, that makes sense. Now that's another, that makes total sense because you would not want to be working against each other. That's a very important point.
So then I guess what would be the recommendation to get to a point where where each of us could talk to our state representatives, state level representatives, about the bills that have been introduced? So there's real progress here, and I think the league could really throw some weight behind these bills that are already in both chambers. So recommendations.
Well, I would recommend writing to Sally Robinson and Jennifer Wilson and Laura Bierman and seeing if there's anything that can be done at the convention plenary sessions to introduce your proposal. I'm not a parliamentarian and I don't know the process, I'm sorry to say, but I do know that we can't go and wear our league hat and speak to our state assembly person or a state senator and say, this is what we want to see happen. We, of course, can always do things as individual people, individual voters, but if the state league has not taken a position on particular legislation or a particular topic, then we can't go and say, this is what the league wants us to do. This is what the league would like you to do as a legislator.
Lori?
There's 2 things that come to mind. The first one that doesn't have a lot of teeth, but definitely you can give directions to the board. So start writing something up for directions to the board that you really spell out that you want them to start taking the lead on, telling us what we can act on at the state level under this new position. But the other thing is the resolution process already, what are the deadlines for writing a resolution? You could write a resolution that should be in the convention kit as to timelines. There's a committee that meets on Saturday morning to determine what resolutions fit within the bylaws to be brought to the floor for vote on Saturday. So that would be your other choice. And then yes, definitely write to Laura, Sally, and say, we really want to start moving at the state level on this. How can we move this forward?
Or Laura, do you think
Is
it's
there another
important we
option?
consider non-program? I think it would come up on plenary, wouldn't it? For like non-recommended or like does it show up at that? Because the resolution I think is pretty limited. I don't know if it would be able to fall under that.
It's too late for the non-recommended items.
Okay.
Everything had to have been presented like in March and April. It's a long time past that. So
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's too late for that.
Leslie?
Is there a third option? I'm just wondering, because there is a national position that speaks to electoral systems. And I know that position or other positions had been used at the national level for state to advocate for early voting, for example, right? Could the board of directors of state simply decide that this falls under the national position and therefore adopt it? Is that an option that we would have as well? I think so, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, because of the history of me bringing it as a non-recommended item in 2019 and lobbying for it and it not passing, I don't think there's a lot of board level, excitement about this. So I think that the local leagues are going to need to take the lead on showing that we are really interested in this, because the state board responds to local league interest, so simply by telling them this is something we're interested in and spelling out specific bills and, we want to act on this and asking, can we lobby on this specifically when a bill arrives, it'll make them have to look at it and then tell us whether or not we can or not. looking at the
Yeah, I think
position.
that way.
Because it's
I
their
think that's
job to
another
look at the position. Yeah, it's their job to
Yeah.
look at the position and interpret it.
Leanne?
There's in the chat.
Hi, I'm from the Cooperstown area, and I was looking at the kit, the pre-convention kit, and actually, can I share my screen real quick?
Yeah, you should be able to.
So if you can see, so this 14 action motions, is this what you guys are talking about that could be done? Because it can be submitted by 5 p.m. on Friday. Would that be the way to go? Because the other ones are like 4 weeks before the convention.
Yeah, that's going to be the one that you can do. It's the action motion at this point.
So
Cool.
I
Although
don't
this-
know if it would help if several did it or something. I'm not sure. Anyway, that was
At
my
this
thought.
point, we don't have a position on ranked choice. So I mean,
No. But we do have a position on electoral systems, like the way you used it, right? And that has, like I said, there's been similar umbrella positions that state has used to push for early voting, because there's also no national position. I believe at least there wasn't on early voting either. And so I talked to Laura Bierman about this a couple of months ago on another topic. And she said, you know, the way they used that was they went to national and they said, could we use this to push for early voting? And they said, yeah, absolutely. We were kind of hoping people would do that. Even though it wasn't explicitly about early voting. So I think the fact that this position exists, the board of directors could decide, if we gave them enough incentive to do so, that ranked choice voting would fall under that national position, that it's broad enough. Yeah.
And I see there are some questions about that in the chat, Christine
Yeah.
and Amanda. Again, it says very confusing. One of the points I was trying to make is that the national position definitely encompasses ranked choice voting. And in fact, if you just looking at the history of it, nearly all the state positions that led up to it are around ranked choice voting. It's just that there are people that are passionate about other alternatives to plurality. Again, I mentioned a couple of them: approval voting, star voting. And so the league just wanted to be inclusive, but and I think very wisely so, because then maybe newer systems will emerge. But ranked choice voting is the dominant one, and it's the national position is 100% compatible with ranked choice voting, if that's what you wanted to present as the alternative or advocate for as the alternative to plurality. That's what it's going to be in 99% of the cases anyway. Does that help? Does that help?
Yeah. And Amanda, I think that's right. I think what's in the chat, which is, would you need the local league? Can your local league work under the rubric of the national position with other organizations to educate the public on ranked choice? And Michelle Lamberti replies, I think you would need your local board approval. That is my understanding, that if you wanted to act under color of the national position, your local board would have to decide that that is you wanted to advocate for ranked choice voting in your municipality. And again, it could only be done at your municipality level. But yeah, as long as the board approves, you shouldn't need a concurrence now.
Question.
Leanne?
So I had a couple thoughts on that. So I'm a member of the NAACP, and I was asking a lot of those questions in the chat because I got that, I got that op-ed as a result of being a member. And and so I reached out to our local NAACP and I said, would you be interested in co-hosting or sponsoring a webinar on ranked choice voting? Would that interest you? And the local guy said, yeah, that'd be great. So we're going to bring it up to our local board to see if our local board would approve doing something like that. And it sounds like what you're saying is, yeah, that would be fine as long as the local board approves it, that we could do some sort of a joint training session or, educational session like that. Is that right?
Yeah.
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 Okay. The other thing that I wanted to mention was it seems to me that in order for someone to make an educated ranked choice vote, you have to actually know more about, because you have to know more about these other candidates than you would have
Yeah.
previously. And
Yeah.
so, which is kind of makes it's hard enough in a way as it is, given how much information is out there. And it seems like that makes this tool like I think Vote 411 becomes incredibly important as a way to do that, and that we really need to put time and money into Vote 411 to enable people to feel like I have a place where I can go where the candidates are going to be asked X questions, and they will have to they respond to it, and then people I just think that would be a great way to go.
Yeah, we
I agree.
feel strongly about that too.
We do.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, I've talked to a lot of cranky people. But it's a little more work. But they do get a bigger say in choosing candidates, and we're hoping they'll find it worth it. So.
I think anything has to be better than having a city council member elected with 13% of the vote.
I was
Really?
wondering if you're gonna find that candidates are more willing to attend league candidate events, because now they're reaching out. I mean, maybe yours all go to yours. We have a real split sometimes that like the Republican leaders tell the Republican candidates don't go, but if they're trying to get that second and third and fourth vote, maybe they'll be more willing to come.
Well, I was hoping. So I will tell you what happened with Vote 411 this year for us. So we've published our voters guide. We reached out to all the candidates. And right now we've gotten, about a 50% response rate overall. Certainly a lot, all the borough presidents for Manhattan, for example, but what hasn't happened is, so out of the 13 people currently running for mayor, only 3 have responded. And if I told you that all 3 were women and none of the male candidates have responded, would you be surprised? Yeah, because that's what happened. Catherine Garcia, Maya Wiley, and Diane Morales have all responded, and no one else has. I keep sending reminders though.
Right.
Terrible. The last election, my representative did not respond. And I went to our site and saw that she hadn't responded, and I'm Facebook friends with her. So I sent her a private message, and she was like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize that I hadn't done that." And she did it. So
Okay.
You need to find somebody who's a
try that,
Facebook friend.
But our board of election did send out this very long all the candidates. So I got to figure out that I don't actually have a city council election.
Yeah, I have mine on the table. Exactly.
This is actually the campaign finance board that does this.
Yeah.
They're mandated in the charter for municipal elections, local elections. There are some who'd love to see them do it for every election, but then who's going to pay for that, right?
Right. Yeah. So, but that's New York City based. So
correct.
You guys don't have that luxury.
And it's very similar to what we do in Vote 411, because they give the candidates the same questions. They don't, but I guess they're more compelled to respond to the campaign finance board, because the campaign finance board also administers the public finance system.
Yeah. Yep. On the other hand, we did get to co-sponsor the mayoral debates this year with WABC TV, so that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Does anybody have anything else? Did we reach a conclusion about what you're going to do for Saturday, or follow through, or
5 p.m. on Friday? Action motion?
Action motion. And lobby everybody to, support it. I don't know how many votes are required for that. Did it say in there like 2/3 or 3/5 or? It's such a weird thing.
This is helpful. Yeah, I'd love to understand.
Majority.
This is my first time through this process. Would love to understand what to do.
Oh, so majority, that's doable. You can do that.
Yeah.
You know, just make it short and sweet and clear. You know, you don't want it to be too complicated. You want people to be able to understand it like very easily what you're asking.
The 4 point, yeah, it looks consistent with everything here.
Yeah.
Totally.
Looks good.
Would it
They
be
just- they just
helpful
need a push.
perhaps to model it on the New York City ranked choice voting? So that it's a little simpler and we have a way to think about it. In other words, just for primaries and special elections?
Oh, good. I would say it's really about, I think New York State, essentially, I guess it's not the action. We use the language concur, essentially to New York State to adopt the national position formally.
Well, but we already have it. No, what you want to do is you want to ask them to take more of a leadership role in lobbying for legislation when it comes up. And
Okay.
we want to be able to
Yes,
be given the
that's
authority
right.
to lobby
Okay.
when it comes up.
So then the legislation that's out there right now there are 2 bills that are very high level, and thank you. Now that's very helpful. One would establish ranked choice voting in New York as an accepted voting method. It's actually very plainly written. The second, 1009, would make it acceptable in national elections. So to the point is a really important one about which elections. So the bill 4495 just makes it an acceptable method. 1009 is very specific to say it can be used for national level elections. And of course, so then perhaps, so I don't know how we phrase it in the motion, but that would be the goal, to support that type of legislation. Is that right?
Yes.
Am I on the right track here?
Sounds like.
Yeah.
Definitely need help.
Yes. So, yeah, you want to write, I mean, have you reached out to Jennifer to ask her about that? Like specifically, Wilson, about the bill? Just point blank ask, can we support this bill that's been introduced?
No, so yeah, I mean, just in brief, like I thought the process that I outlined about us all concurring and then working at the state level, I thought that was the process.
Okay.
Like there's a way to short circuit a lot of this
Yes.
because of the national position, which I didn't understand at all. So I'm delighted to have to hear this and learn more about the mechanics, right, of how to do this.
I think, Laura, you're exactly right that Joe's best move is to just phone up Jennifer and say, can we support this? And then cite the national position.
We actually spoke to Laura about it and we can't. So we did go that route too, because
Okay,
the
yeah.
position was that like, this is kind of a contentious issue among some of the leagues. Like we don't have a position on ranked choice.
Okay.
And since the US position is a rubric by which to evaluate things, like they felt like there was no way we were hanging our hat on that.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
that's the sense. And when we asked, I actually did, because I'll have to deal with the motions. The action motion is going to be very specific. And so it's like, she gave me the example of like a letter to the governor. And since the legislative session ends tomorrow, they're really, unless they, I guess, continue some like remote hearings in the fall, like that will cut off action items to the sense that there is no legislative session. So there will be no action to be taken right now. That's how it was explained to me. Just a sense of what the lay of the land will be when those are evaluated by the committee to see if they would move out.
I mean, my head is swimming with
right. It's like a lot of like rubric, right? It's like a lot of like
Yeah.
rubric because it has to go to the committee and then the committee decides if it will come up.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like what will ultimately maybe need to happen is that we are going to have to concur with New York City's position on ranked choice voting.
And Laura said we could do
Yeah.
that. So she said what locals could do is they can concur with New York City. That's
Yeah,
the
that's
easiest
going to be
kind
the
of
quickest way.
way.
Now, that's going to just do it at the local municipal level,
Right.
not the state level. And then the state is going to be a different thing that we're going to have to undertake.
Right. And then if
Yeah.
you get enough people at the local level, then it puts more pressure on the state to like at
state.
least consider it or to think like, do they want to study it? Do they feel like there's enough consensus that they'll move forward with it? But Laura did recommend that. She said, if you want, you could do the concurrence locally and base it on New York City, since you guys have, because you didn't hang it on the US position. So you have study materials that we could use. It would be pretty easy to kind of use those.
Yeah.
And I
we
wonder
would
if
put you in
making those
touch with
available
Bella.
to anyone who's interested too, to say like, locally, if you want to do this, here are all the materials
Yeah.
we use. This is what we did. Because I think that's probably helpful to a lot of the
Mhm.
locals who might be interested.
Absolutely. So, Laura, would you be the right contact point, or is Bella? Hang?
I can be the right, I can reach out to Bella as need be, but
Okay.
yeah, so I can be the contact and move it through. Yeah, so Bella Wong did a lot of the testimony, or at least testified a few times, but I certainly have a lot of the materials. If you want to reach out
Can
to
I
me
put-
first.
Can I put your email in the chat, Laura?
Sure.
Which one do you want me to put? Trainings?
Yeah, trainings.
Mhm. Common
Okay.
Cause was also one of the
Yes.
organizations that took a leadership role in testifying before the city council.
Definitely.
So you could reach out to them as well. And we,
And Adrian Kivelson, right?
yeah, we were studying this
Adrian.
way back. We
Yeah,
called it,
yeah.
we
And
just
Adrian
called it
had a lot of
instant runoff voting in those days.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll just patch you through. So,
Cool.
all right, so it's 8:58. Should we call it a day? So, guys, this is
Thank you.
interesting. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, been fascinating. Thank you, Joe.
everyone.
Thank you. Really
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank
this.
you.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Bye.
Take care.
Have a good night.